Okay. So DOM manipulation. What does DOM stand for? This is something you memorize. Document, object, model. Okay. Document, object, model. What is a document? We've written quite a few of them. We may not. It's the HTML page. Yeah. So the HTML is the document, lowercase d document. So I'll actually say document object model, because this is the word we use in JavaScript to access our HTML page. And what data type can we imagine that the document is oriented as if we're thinking it in the terms of JavaScript? And I know you haven't seen it yet, but from the name itself, what data type do we think the DOM is? Not a string, it has strings in it. So if it's the document object model, it's an object, okay. So the name is plain text. The document is HTML. It is turned into an object model so that in JavaScript, we can interact with it with a data type that JavaScript understands. JavaScript understands objects, lets you use, manipulate, change, delete, all that. And so if we can get our HTML page in that form, we make changes to that object, that immediately makes changes to the HTML page. So learning how to change a page over time is all about learning the document object, what it looks like, how you use it. It has a whole bunch of methods inside of it, you know, pre-built functions that we get to use to access our HTML page. It's quite fascinating. And I don't know about you, but there's something so satisfying about clicking a button that you write, having it do something you wrote. We're getting there today, which is great. Okay, so the document object model. It is a JavaScript object, and we get access to it as soon as we link a JavaScript file to an HTML file. How do we link those two files together again? Script tag links HTML to JS and creates the document object model, which is referred to in any JavaScript page that's linked to an HTML page will automatically have a word called documents, a reserved word. Whenever we say that, we're referring to our HTML page. Cool? Stop me if you have any questions, but let's look at how this is. Yeah. It's in Slack. If you go to Slack, click on this little pinned items inside, you go to main channel, click on the pin, and this will be here for the rest of the course. If you click this link, you can jump in whenever I have it going. Yes, and also the YouTube playlist, I upload all the class videos immediately after, so they should be up within 20 or 30 minutes after the lesson. You can come to YouTube and watch it later, or sections of it as needed. Just make sure, brief side note, if you find yourself watching a video for more than an hour, you're doing it wrong. You gotta be stopping and typing. So many times where I go to look for a problem online, and 4 hours later, I understand the 4 tiers of object-oriented programming, but I've written nothing, which means I actually didn't learn anything. I just read a bunch. So keep that in mind. All right, so let's create an HTML page. Done. That's nice. And we'll link it together with a script tag, giving it a relative path, just for good syntax here. While we're at it, in case we need it, we'll also link a style sheet. All right, so this is the document. And now that my JavaScript is linked to it, I now have a word called document. And you can see it even tells me about it. This is only defined once we have that script tag again. So if your document is not defined and you're running this with HTML, that is your problem. Let's console.dir the document and hope it works this time. We're going to open this up in the browser and just see what this looks like. Hey, look at that. It worked this time. So I'll make this a bit bigger. This is the document. It's telling us it's console logging on line 1. And whenever you see this in the console, this little arrow, that means you can open this to see more. So this is what the HTML page is turned into for JavaScript purposes. This giant object with all sorts of things. These are all events, event listeners that we'll learn later today, a couple of these. But all these different relationships, it knows who its parents are, its children elements are. As you can see, it's quite comprehensive. And then each of these have their own properties. You know, we go into here, and it's a never-ending object, basically. So trying to memorize what the DOM looks like and how it works is a near impossible feat, but learning a good portion of it is what you need to make successful websites. And then you kind of look up those edge cases as you run into them. You know, is there a document property that helps me with what I'm doing currently? Probably assume what the body is. It's the body tag of our HTML. There's a head tag, even what URL the site is currently being hosted on. Okay, so that is the document. Side note, there is one other variable that becomes available when we link a JavaScript file. Does anyone know what the other variable we get is? We get document and one other. We will be using that, but no, I'm thinking of a large object. It starts with W and ends with indo. The window. So the window refers to the browser the user's using. What's their interface? And we see this, it is also a giant object of the browser support for this website. It also has its own set of event listeners, lets you know where they are, you can tell them where to scroll to, all sorts of things that we use the window for to enhance the user's experience. All right, so document and window, two objects that automatically become available when we link a JavaScript and HTML page together. We won't be using the window much. There are purposes for it, we'll look at it later. We're gonna focus on the document. I'll actually keep that there just so we know that they exist. So two objects. We'll pull this over. Okay. So first, with the DOM, it's all about interacting with elements. And what are elements? Not in JavaScript, but in HTML. What are elements? What's an example of an element? Yeah, exactly. Div, p tag. These are all elements. When we, these are all converted into objects themselves in the DOM. They're in this big object. It's one of the childs of the object. This is now inside of the DOM object. And now let's say I gave this a class of something. What is actually happening in the background in JavaScript instead of the DOM object is, if we're thinking of the object, this won't, I'll delete this in a moment because we don't want to overwrite that. But you got to think of it as an object that has now a div property, that its own object with a class of whatever we give it, maybe an ID of whatever we give it. It's creating these objects inside of our document object model so we can later, if we wanted to change something, this is pseudocode, but we could say document.div.class now equals my other class. And the user, if we maybe had this change on a button click, we're changing the class of the div, the user would just see the style change. In the background, we're changing properties of the object that's making this happen. Okay, so that's pseudocode. That's not exactly how it looks, but that is the idea of what's happening. So we need to know how to select these elements in JavaScript, because we could dig down into that document object many levels and find what we're looking for, but it'd be nicer if we could just grab it explicitly with one line. So the way that we do that is through different selectors. in JavaScript, we have three main ones we'll look at. We have document. So we'll always use the document keyword if we're interacting with our HTML. We'll say document dot get element by tag name. This is one way to select an element or a group of elements. This will always give you a group of elements denoted by this part of the sentence, get elements by tag name. So what this will take is a string representation of the tags we want to select. So if I want to grab all divs, I could say, go grab all divs for me this way. What this will return is that HTML collection of divs that I have on my HTML page, but I need to store them somewhere. So how could I store the result somewhere so I could use it later? What's that? Yes, assign it to a variable. So I could call this the div array, set it equal to that, and then I'm going to console.log the div array. Let's add a few more divs in here so this array is a little bit larger. Okay, so we're grabbing all of our divs and then we're just console logging it. We have an HTML collection with 3 items in it. We look at our HTML page. That's correct. We have 3 div tags. We open this up, and in fact, it is an array of 3 different divs. And what data type does this look like? An object. So all these divs have been turned into objects for JavaScript purposes. And we can change their attributes, you know, like source or class or ID. We can change their classes through the class list property. There's all sorts of, we can use style to change their style, but using JavaScript instead of CSS. It's still CSS, but it's CSS in JavaScript. So that's the first way, but that's not very specific. You know, if we have 100 divs and we just need one of them, how do we get that individual item out? So what is the CSS selector we use for an individual item? ID, yeah. So let's say I only want to grab this div. I'll give it an ID of my div. Yeah, that's right. In my JavaScript, I'll grab it. So I'll say our first div equals document get element by ID. And notice it's not elements, it's element because we're grabbing a singular. So this won't return an array. What will it probably return? Just a single object of the one thing that we grabbed. I'll say my div. Yeah. And now, yes, even if there's only one div on the page, you'll still get an array with that one div in it because there could be more. It'll always give you an array, consistent that way. Let's console log our first div. All right, I console logged it. We're getting the div. This is why console.dir is nice. It's literally going to show, hey, we grabbed this div from the DOM, but I want to see it in its JavaScript form. So I'll say console.dir. Here's my div with the ID of my div. Here's all of its attributes. Notice the text content is empty. Let's go write something into it. We'll say, this is my div. And now when we go into our div logged in the console and go down to our text content, it is still empty. Where did it go? Well, it's in the outer text. Okay, they put it here. We can see every property of this, what's inside of it, what attributes it has. I think you are seeing the point of what I'm trying to drill in here. Getting to know this object, looking at it will make it less mysterious and easier to work with. There's a lot of nice things in here. Okay, so we're going to be using get element by ID for the most part going forward. This is the easiest one to work with because we know exactly what we're getting. But feel free to experiment with tag name if you wanted to grab like all 8 tags and give them the same click event, something like that. But there's one other way we can select elements in CSS. What's that? We've done IDs and tag name. What's the other selector we have in CSS? Class. Cool. I'll say class my other div. I'll just copy this to the other div as well. Who wants to take a guess on what this line is for classes? Document dot what? If you had to guess. Get elements by, oh dang, it's on the board. Okay, get elements by class name. And notice S. So what are we gonna get back? What data type? An array. Even if there's only one div, which actually let's do that first. Let's get rid of this one and grab my other div and console.log our class. I'm gonna say class divs because there's multiple. And notice it's still a collection of one, but it's still an array with a single item. So index 0 is this first div. I go back to my HTML and bring this back. Now the collection has 2. Index 0 is the first div. Index 1 is the second div. So question, think about this. I want to select just this div, but use get elements by class name. So first off, what is this data type again? It's going to be an array of objects. I can, it's an array. So if I want to grab the second div in the list, what index number is that? 1. So I will just say, grab me the first one. And now I'm just console logging that one div. So I could do that here to say, give me the first item from the array that this receives, and now this is just an object, which class divs is a bad name for that now. Or if that's a little too much, putting brackets on brackets, we could separate this and then say var second div is my class divs at bracket 1. So now my class divs is still the array, but my console.log of second div is just that individual one. Yes.
So when you get elements by, I noticed that one does have
Yes. I say a lot of things. Yeah, get element by ID means we will always get a single object back. All the rest, tag name is an elements, class name is an elements because there could be more than one. It'll always give you an array. Notice the casing on all of these. They're all camel cased, including the word ID. This is probably one of the most common beginning mistakes. That is not a method. That will not work. And immediately, hey, we got a type error. Document.getElementById is not a function. So starting today, console will now be your best friend. When you make a mistake in JavaScript, it'll try to tell you as plainly as possible what's happening here and on what line. So in your app.js file, line 7, cool. You said get element by ID and that's not a function. That's right, it needs to be camel case. So have this console open when you're working in JavaScript. Check it often. If you're not on the console, if you're on elements and something goes wrong, where's an indicator on here that something is wrong? This means check your console. You see red X, I'm getting an error. And if you're struggling, like trying to find the problem, and I come over and I'm like, have you opened the console yet? I'm expecting the first few times, every once in a while, to be no, but you'll quickly learn that if you check there, you'll be able to figure it out. Most of the time, yeah.
I think you mentioned it. Can you just explain again the difference between console.log and console.log, or why you use
Yeah. So console.log is just to like give me a message as a string. So when I say console.log a div, it shows me the literal string, which is this. It makes it look like that. When we say console.dir, what we're really saying is console log a directory, which is asking if this can be seen as an object, turn it into one so I can look at it that way. Where every DOM element is an object, so you can always console.dir it and see more properties, or you can just console.log it and see what it looks like, making sure you grab the right element by seeing it like this. Now I could console log class divs because it's an array already. So I don't need to say, show me that as a directory. If I did dir, it'll look the same way. So that's just playing around with it a little bit. Very helpful. Okay, so these are the main three selecting types. Get elements by tag name, get elements by ID, get elements by class name. And notice all I have to put in here is the class name or the ID name with no specification of whether they're a class or not, or an ID or not, because that's noted in the name. There are two other ways to select elements that I'll just show you for the sake of showing. These are query selectors. So these, there's two types of query selectors. There's a way to grab one item, or there's a way to grab an array of items, just like these others. But they can look for anything. They can look for tag names, IDs, and classes. So they're kind of like, they work for any situation. So let me grab all my divs again. I'll name it something slightly different so it works. I'll say document.query selector all, and just give it the tag name. It'll see that this is a tag, it'll go grab all my divs. If I wanted to get all the ones with the class my other div, I'd have to tell the query selector this is a class. I have to say dot my other div. Query selector has to be told what it's looking for. ID, class, tag name, but this will do the same thing as what this did. So query selector all, its counterpart for grabbing an individual item is document.query selector, and then we just give it the one item we want. Let's give it my div, the ID. So I'll say hashtag my div to denote this is an ID that you're looking for. Yes.
All right, so would it be pretty much the same thing if you're using console and the editor versus HTML package?
For what purpose?
For this, everything like catching your
Oh yeah, you mean the console down here inside of VS Code? So that's only gonna work when we use Node. And right now we're not using Node. This is basic web development as it has been. Node has made it better because we can import a lot of things that this doesn't have by default. We were just gonna work with this for a week and then.
Which do you like better?
When I'm using just HTML and JavaScript, it's always this console, always. Once we get to Node, it's going to be a mix of both. Yeah.
Yeah, question probably. But for the first all, there's only two options. Like you should put an element, which is just element or a class where you put dot.
Right. You wouldn't do ID because you shouldn't have multiple IDs. Good point. I think I said ID on this. That doesn't make any sense. Or at least it shouldn't. If it grabs multiples, you're using IDs wrong. Okay. All right, so now we've learned how to select elements. Let's get to the fun stuff. This is just the need to know. Okay. All right, well, what if, let's think of a web page where something might just pop up, or you click a button, or you have to do something before something shows up. As far as you have to log in before your username actually shows on the screen. That H1 or that P tag that your username is showing up in may not exist until you click the button. It's not on the HTML page. It's all created in JavaScript and then manually put on the HTML page. So we need to look at that process. How do we create an HTML element in JavaScript? How do we put things like text and class and styles on it? And then how do we append it to the document, add it to the object so the user sees it show up? So there's a three-step process that I want you to kind of live by while you're learning this, but this is how we get JS elements to show up on the DOM. And I'm saying JavaScript element because we are creating this in JavaScript. We're creating HTML elements. As soon as they're on the document, that's what they are. But it is just pure JavaScript doing this. So three-step process. One, create the element. How do we create an element? Let's I'm gonna kind of squash this stuff up so we have more screen space to work with. And what I'd like to do is put an H1. My goal is to get an H1 to show up in this div that says hello world. So without being able to do this, how do we make this happen? All right. So first we got to create the element. What kind of element are we needing to create? H1. Okay. So the keyword we use whenever we want to access the HTML page, document, and it has a dot create element method. Very straightforward. It's named exactly what you'd hoped it'd be named. And what it needs is the string representation of the element we want to create. So in here I'll put double quotes and I'll say I need an H1. This statement returns an H1 tag with all of its base attributes, just as if we wrote an empty H1 tag in our HTML page. So I'm going to save this in a variable so I can use it later on in my program. So if I wanted to create a P tag, give it a P tag, span, form, any of those. This is the pure word of the HTML element. We're creating an H1. Next, step 2 is edit the element. Edit the element can be a huge step because all we're going to do is put text inside of an H1. That's what our edit we're going to do. But this can include adding events, adding classes, adding all sorts of effects. It may be hundreds of lines long just for this, one element. We're gonna keep it simple to start off with. So we're gonna say, using our H1 that we have now, we're gonna add text to it. So I'll say H1, which is the DOM element, and it will have a dot text content. And this is not a method, it's an attribute. So we set it equal to the text we want it to have. Hello world. There's a few different ways to get text into an element. This is the most straightforward. It's literally creating H1, putting the text inside. Yeah.
So there's no way to just create the element with.
There is. Yeah, if you think there's another way, there always is. So we'll be looking at many ways. This is one way. So what would the third step be? This is the last and final step. We're not seeing hello world here yet. So what might step 3 be? Yeah, display the element on the HTML, which really means append the element to the DOM object, which is redundant document object model object, but you get it. Okay. So append is the kind of the keyword here. What do you think of when you hear the word append? Add to. Yeah, so there is a method in JavaScript called, or on the DOM called append child that needs to be called on a parent to tell it to add a child element into it. And this is where the parent-child relationship of HTML really starts becoming important. So if this is the div and the H1's inside of it, which one's the parent, which one's the child? If we're going for this effect. H1 is the child of the parent div. So I need to tell this div to append a child element, the one I created. Okay, see how this works? Well, in order to do that, I need to make sure I have this div available to me in JavaScript. So let's make sure we grabbed it, and we did. We called it first div, so I'll just use it there. Or we could just say div. I'm going to comment this one out so we don't have duplication. So we already have that div available to us. I'm going to pull it down here, actually. All right, so now I have the div from the DOM. This one already exists. It's on the page. And I need to say, you append an H1 as a child. So I'll say first div dot append child. And what do we think goes in the parentheses? What is the child we're trying to append? H1. Why is it H1? I called it that. I could call this Not that one. I'll change it in a second. Super fancy duck. And this is, oh goodness, H1. We're seeing it show up just fine. So the naming of it doesn't matter, but it does. I don't want to try to figure out what super fancy duck is. So just call it what it is. If it's the title, maybe call it the title H1 or just title, whatever works best semantically for you. I'm going to call it H1 because I'm only making one here. So 3 steps: create the element, edit the element, then make it show up on the DOM. The methods needed to do that is create element, getting the element, the parent element by ID or class or tag, and then appending a child, the H1, into a parent, our div. And when we're editing here, this is just a property of a text element. We can add text content. Let's soak for a second. Is there any questions? This is straight. Don't feel like you get it. Yeah.
I don't want a question
That is fair. Completely fair. Let's look at some more examples. I think that'll help. Let's just see if this, that's events.
Basically, you're creating an element, and for the name of that element, just set a variable. Do you need to have something in brackets? Is that what?
Right here. Yes, that is telling the create element method what element do I want to create it, and store it in this variable.
Saying I want to make an image, would I put MI?
You would. So let's do that next. Let's create an image. We'll add a source attribute to it. We'll add the image to the source, and then we'll put it on the DOM just to show how that works. But before we do that, let's change the color of our first div without going to our CSS sheet. If we remember back to HTML, do you remember what we use for inline styling? If I just wanted to do my style right here on the div, what keyword or attribute I'd have to give it? Style. Okay, so just like this div has an ID property in its object, it'll also have a style property in its object that looks like this. So we can access that to change this on the fly in JavaScript. So in the edit the element, let's change the color. Let's say h1.style dot what CSS selector do we want to use, or CSS property. I'll say color equals pink. Now I've got a pink H1. So now I've changed the text content and the color. You can also say h1.style.background color equals some sort of soft gray. Okay. What's different about this as opposed to writing background color in CSS? Line 24. When I write background color, how does that differ from CSS? Yeah, in CSS, remember, we write it like this. But how does JavaScript read that statement? Background minus color. It doesn't know. So when we're writing CSS in JavaScript, camel case is still a convention. So background color becomes background color, like that.
Question.
Yeah.
Is it possible to modify the element after you append it?
Yes, if I grab the element, oh, I see, after it's put on the DOM. Yeah, if after this point, it's now a property of the DOM, just like this div is. So down here, I'd actually then have to say var, my h1 equals document.get element by something, and grab it from the DOM to start playing with it. Yeah, we're just focusing on creating, editing, appending. Let's look at one more style property like font family. It's not font dash family, font family, camel case. needs a dash, doesn't it? Yeah. All right, so this is totally available. As soon as you have an element, it has to be an element. It can't be, you can't say document dot style. You'd have to say some element of the document, at least. You know, we could say document dot body, which is the body element, dot style, dot background color equals Firebrick maybe, to change the whole page if we wanted to. Grabs the body of the document. Oh, okay. Let's just get rid of that for now. All right, so next let's follow this same process with making an image tag and putting it right here inside of the same div. We want it to be right below the H1, just as if we came into here and manually wrote H1 and then image tag. All right, so step one, what is it? And what are we doing? Create the element. How do I create an element? I'll say var image, or my image equals. What is the command? Document dot create element. img. Okay, we have our image tag. If I console.log my image, we'll see a little image tag show here. It's an empty one, but it exists now. Step two. Yeah, edit the element. It's wide, very, wide encompassing. So I want to add something to my image. So I have to use this keyword now. This is my object, my image. And what do we need to add to an image to make a source? Oh yeah. So text content is for text elements that have an open and closing tag. Since this is self-closing, we just have to give it an attribute of some sort. Now, how would we do this in HTML? Just to make sure we remember, but if I said image, I add attributes by putting them right in the tag like this. These are just object properties when we're in JavaScript. So I can add this source a couple different ways. I can say myimage.src to add that property as an attribute, and then grab a URL. So I'll go to Unsplash, best place for free images. Sure. We'll go back. Oh, we're not seeing anything yet. What's going on? What could be going wrong? Yeah, it's not on the DOM yet. This is still in JavaScript. Why did my image show up? It's not on the DOM. So step three, put it on the DOM. We might need to add some dimensions, but we'll see. So now, how do I get this to sit right below the H1 inside of the same div? So if I said my image.append child, I'm saying my image is the parent. So what is the actual parent element here? First div, that one that we grabbed earlier, that we then said append the H1 into it. So I will say first div dot append child my image. Hey, broken image link. So this is a bad URL. But hey, it showed up. That's the big part. Why isn't this working? Oh, I did copy link address, huh? Copy image address. There's a big reveal. Okay. If you don't like this whole words going off the side of the page thing in VS Code, if you click on View at the top of your Mac and then click on Toggle Word Wrap, it'll word wrap it for you. Very nice. Stays responsive. Okay, what if I want to change the width of this image to be, let's say, 400 pixels? Who can help me write that line?
My image.
Not just yet. Dot something else. Dot.
Oh,
Dot style. We're inline styling here. Dot width equals 400 pixels. Okay. So everything we've been doing in HTML and CSS is all capable through JavaScript. Yeah, if we go to my CSS page right now, big old blank.
So what's the advantage of doing this besides the styles, I guess?
So it's both. So I'll be using CSS to set up what my website looks like when the user gets there. First and foremost, that's my first goal. So, I don't want margin, I want things to hug up to the sides. What's that? Yeah, you use both for sure. So I'll set up a lot of things on my page, CSS. And then let's say I have, oh, we really need to get to event listeners to get some good examples.
Or you
But
can use, like, for example, some things don't, when the page loads, some things won't already exist in the document. Like, say, for example, if the user wants to add something, you can't style something that doesn't exist yet because it doesn't exist. So you can't add a style for example, in CSS because the element won't exist on the page. Or if it's like add a new picture or something, it doesn't exist on the page yet because the user hasn't added it. But in JavaScript, if you say when the user adds this new picture, apply the style to it, you can do that.
yeah, so you can write, perfect example. You can write all your CSS classes and then just add them in JavaScript too. Like, hey, create this div and add this class that already exists to it.
So here's simply like either than, having, create your business object, the stylings beforehand and just display like
Yeah.
visible, something that just create the object when prompted.
Yeah, and we'll look at that next. We'll add a class to something we create, and the class already exists, but it's in our CSS page.
So this, it is mostly used, I did it with Lexico.
This is more just so we can see style. To be honest, the majority of your styling will be in CSS. When you do styling in JavaScript, it's because you mean for that style to change over time. CSS is like, great, it's there, it works. JavaScript is the ability to change it. So if I want my background color, my font family, all that to stay the same, but one button needs to change its color when something happens, that is the one time I will say, okay, button.style.background color now equals this when they've clicked this button.
I guess if you start with, the CSS initially, it's like the initial state of the page, and if you just want to modify something temporarily, you can do the stuff in JavaScript, and it's then after the page loads, and go back to it.
Yeah, it'll do that too. Yeah, this is the default style they'll see when they hit the page, whatever's on the CSS. But a lot of our CSS can be pre-written and not being used until it needs to be. So they click this button, which triggers an event that makes an H1 tag and says, add this class to it. That class already exists in CSS. We're now just using it on something. So let's see how that works real quick. Let's make a p tag with some text in it, but we won't do any of the styling here. We'll just add the class list to it here. We'll put the p tag down here. We'd like it to be 100% wide of the page with a background color and centered. So I'll go to my CSS and I'll say, all right, I'm going to use a p tag. I'll give it a class of p tag class, which is really general and probably not the best example. But here I'll hard code some values. We'll say background color, soft gray. Width is 100% viewer width, so it spans the whole page. It's text aligned to the center. Has a font family of sans serif and a light font. Like, we can do all these styles right here before the p tag exists. Now in the app.js, I'll follow that same 3-step process. I'll create my p tag, so var p tag. Document.create element p. And let's skip to step 3 real quick, and then we'll do the step 2 class list addition. So step 3 is grabbing maybe our first div again and appending the p tag into it. First div.append child p tag. It's now here on the page. We can't see it because it doesn't have any content, but we go to our elements console. And sure enough, we go in this div. P tag's down here. It's just empty. So let's give it a little text content so it shows up. ptag.text content equals Harry Potter. And it gets the default p-tag styling, so I haven't given it any styling. So one way to add a class is by using the tag itself. We can say ptag.classList. So class list is a really nice selector. It lets you add classes, remove classes, and even toggle classes with preset methods. So I want to add a class. I will say ClassList.add, which is a method. And then in here, I get to put the class that I want to add to it, which is what? ptag class. And now my ptag has that styling. And this is way more preferred than writing every single style rule for each element you create. Your JavaScript's going to get monstrous with style. We want to separate these concerns and do as much as we can in CSS, and then just add the class when we need to add it. You know, oh, this p tag got created for some reason. Here's this text. This is what it should be styled as. Put it on the DOM. Now there's also a class list.remove, where we'd say p tag class. And now it was added and then it was immediately removed. We don't see it. And there's one other one we'll look at later, class list.toggle. And toggle is cool because it will see, is the class currently added? If so, remove it. If it's not, add it. So we added it, we removed it, toggle notices it's not there and adds it again. There's a couple of ways to manage classes. Any questions on that? There will be, I know, but.
Would it be possible to, let's say, for that first bit of child, right?
Mm-hmm.
Would it be possible to, like, at the beginning, like, append it?
Yep.
To tag where the first bit is at, the first bit of tag is at?
There is. There's no way to like insert in the middle, but append child says put it at the bottom. If there's other elements there, just add it to the bottom of the list. For some reason, they didn't say append before, append after. That would have been really nice. They chose append child to be after whatever is already there, and insert before to put it up above. So now it's floating up above, which I'm curious why we're not seeing it. One sec. Insert before. Oh, there's the insert adjacent too, where you can put it right next to another one inside. We're not seeing it show up for some odd reason. Let's get rid of the H1 and see. It's just first div.insert before. Yeah, it's not helping me out here, but that's the one that you want to use. It's not even showing up anymore. Something's breaking. Hey, look, you got an error. Let's go see. Failed to execute insert before on node. 2 arguments required, but only 1 present. Ooh, what is that telling us about insert before? If you got this really ambiguous error message, what is this telling you? I need another parameter. I'm giving it a tag, but this error is saying I actually need 2 arguments. I'm not the same as append child. So where do we go from here? Yeah, Google search. We will W3 document.insert before JS. All right. And let's see the syntax. So insert before isn't just automatically put at the beginning of the list. It says, what do you want me to put and directly before what? It's asking for another element to tell me where, where to put it before. Well, I want to put it before this, where did I put it? I think I commented it out. One sec. I want to put it before that title. Oh yeah, this, I want to put it before this H1, which which I created way up here. So I'll say insert before, put the P tag before the H1. Ah, there we go. Now we're using it correctly, no errors. We solve bugs. Yes, because since it's a function, we're just providing two comma separated parameters. Yep. So I want you to be asking for help. Please keep us very much in tune with where you are so we can catch things early and help quick. But also don't lean on that. Please try to solve bugs. If you're stuck for more than 15, 20 minutes, definitely reach out. But I think that you can read between the lines in the console after a little while and start seeing where to go. I'll usually take you on a Google search adventure if you bring me over. So if you want to do that, that's fun. Okay, so we've looked at, I'm going to change this back to, or should I leave this here for note purposes? Yeah. Yeah, I'll send you all this for sure. Let's see. So we have a bunch of exercises to work with Java, the DOM on. But reading through them all here, I think they all require events and forms. So this afternoon is going to be a lot of work time. Sweet. All right, let's do a 10-minute exercise here. We'll take a little break. We'll do a little bit more and go to lunch. What I'd like you to do, I will leave this right here and this alone. This first example that we did. What I'd like you to do is create a new exercise. Just call it DOM practice, something like that. And link your HTML and your JavaScript page. Just create an element, add something to it, style it however you'd like, and get it on the DOM. I just want you to write this out once so we can squash any bugs right now together with this main process. And then we'll look at forms and events a little bit before going to lunch. Let's plan on the next lesson at 11:50. So between now and then, once you get something on the DOM, take a little break. We'll be back and we'll finish strong for the morning.
Like how much would you like?
Just tell, I'd do a couple, yeah, do maybe 2 or 3 elements if you can, just reiterate the process, this routine. Got a splinters. Ow. And that's now on the recording, so I'm going to stop the recording.